Alrighty, gents. Good evening and welcome to another episode, number 68 of the Racing Line podcast. Still early days in 2023, still a lot of previewing. And this episode is also no surprise in that regard. But one thing that has happened this week on the pod is that we've kind of decided to streamline our intentions a little bit, tried to streamline our content just to kind of hit on what people seem to be liking and to kind of chop away some of the things that aren't getting the traction they deserve. So
trim the fat.
Yeah, trim the fat. So for 2023, Racing Line podcast is going to focus solely on Formula 1 and V8 supercars, because that seemed to be what the traction points were for the podcast. We probably need a new background then for the next pod. But staying true to that change, tonight is all about supercars. And if anyone has been looking at any of the supercars socials or any of the team socials over the last week and a half, 2 weeks, it's been lighting up with new liveries. It's been lighting up with some initial tests that teams have been running over the last fortnight or so. We're down to 1 or 2 more liveries to be revealed. Tonight in Sydney was the launch of the 2023 season. So, and we've got the test coming up as well in the next 2 days. So as far as supercars are concerned, there's been a lot of conjecture about whether the cars were even going to hit the track in Newcastle, whether they were going to be, ready to go racing, whether they were going to be reliable. I mean, with all the testing and that's happened already, things are looking pretty good. So let's just jump straight into it, boys. And I think the place we have to start, because human beings eat with their eyes, is aesthetics. And we've been privy to some pretty nice liveries over the last fortnight in supercar land. So Harry and Joe, let me throw this to you. Liveries. What do we like? What don't we like? How does it excite you for 2023?
I'm gonna go off on a limb and say, I think in general, I would say a lot of the liveries have been safe. 1 second. Wait, I'm gonna have to cut this out. This dog has picked up a toy next to me, and I can't hear what I'm saying. He's just chewing on this toy. I think a lot of the liveries have been safe. I think there's a few standout ones I've really enjoyed.
Come on, you got to start with the excitement. Which ones do you love? Give me the standout ones. Let's go standout.
Standout ones. Walkinshaws, I think, look great. I want to give a shout out to Matt Stone Racing. I think it looks awesome with its orange. I think the Team 18s look pretty good. And I think from the front, the 888 car looks phenomenal. I think there's been a few of, I think I like the one of the Brad Jones racing cars. There's Jack Smith car for the racing stripes. I think that looks really mean.
Yeah, you've been talking a lot about racing stripes this week, Joe.
I feel like the shape of these cars is what we've been waiting for. I just think a lot of the liveries haven't utilized the shape of the cars to their fullest potential. But I feel like when I look at the Walkinshaw, and I'm biased, but I'm trying not to be biased, I think that is one of the sort of smartest liveries that's come out. It's a Mustang that has racing stripes. It's also celebrating, I think, 30 years with Mobil Ones. They've gone back to the all-white car in commemoration of that. And I think because the car is white, the silver rims look really, really clean on that as well.
I have to say, it's hard to beat. Like, it's that livery looks good. That livery objectively is classy.
I think as well, like a lot of the cars look better when you see them in pictures on the track, whereas sometimes the profile looks a little bit strange when it's just on like a white background or on a stage. But like realistically, when I see the cars, I'm excited to see them racing on track in anger. I think a lot of the cars have really cleaned up their look. for the start of this new generation. That's definitely, I think, a positive.
Let me throw to you, Harry. What do you like? What don't you like?
Favorite one, again, maybe a little bias, is the Chaz Mostert Walkinshaw. That teal on the white. I think they did it masterstroke with the white instead of the black base. I think it looks so much better. I do like Bryce Fullwood's Middies electrical car. I just love that color. That wasn't one of my favorite ones last year as well. Shout out to DJR. They went out in a limit, did something different. Jokes.
They did something different. They put some yellow on the skirts.
I will say the Red Bull testing livery they had was that's number one for me. That one is epic.
They had a video. I don't know if it was them or maybe it was Speed Cafe, but Speed Cafe did a video of their test day in that livery, and like I was watching it, and I swear, like if they had have kept that livery for the season, it would not have looked out of place. It would have looked awesome. Like it's a tidy livery, that test livery.
But you can, if you look, have the picture of that new car from the front.
Yeah, I've seen it with the red.
With the red line, really does look neat. I'm a massive fan of that. I don't
mind that livery at all. Like I don't mind the whole livery. Like there's a bit of red for the super cheap throughout.
The fact that they've got rid of the white and brought red on instead, I think looks really good.
Yeah, I was going to say it looks better than last year's one by far.
The thing I'm not sure of is that big red signage on the back for the amp hole. I think they could have just neatened up the shape of it, but I'm sort of nitpicking. There's no bad looking cars, that's the thing, but there was not many wowers.
I will say, I said it in our chat this morning, I don't like Monster Energy cars. I just think they look shit. But that Cam Waters car looks a lot better than last year. And I don't know about you, but do you think it's because the cars are actually in proportion this year and they look
I reckon
normal?
The Cam Waters car was one of the better looking Mustangs from yesteryear as well, because it was so black. It actually hid a lot of the elongations about it. But when I look at it this year as well, like I'm a black rims kind of guy. I think that car looks mean. Like I think if you've got all these colorful cars there aren't many black rims this year, and I don't know if that's going to change before the season starts. I hope it does for a few of them. But that car looks literally like, a dark horse, like a physical, Knight Rider.
Can I tell you something, right?
And it is a Mustang.
The backgrounds that Tickford use on their pictures don't allow you to see the cars in their best light.
They're very dark,
so
aren't they?
Dark and green. I'm just like, man, I want to see some shape and some real color. I think I was a little bit underwhelmed, and I think it was due to the fact that I couldn't see the shapes. And then I think there was one thing I noticed as well, because that whole car is black, but the grille section of that Mustang is so neat, you don't actually see the sort of nice curvature in that sort of nose section.
That's why I
like all black car.
I feel like that car looked, from the front view actually looked. Anyway, I think it looks hot. The argument could be made they could do a little bit more. I mean, like a green grille on a Monster Energy car, something like that. Like Ken Block's done that a few times and he's done it pretty successfully. So,
which I'm pretty sure Cam's had it on his car before, a green grille.
Back, I think it was his first year. Like his first year with Monster, they had a bit more color than just the black. They had a bit of gray on on it as well. But for the longest time, I guess if it's not broke, you don't need to fix it. And if Monster's fitting the bill for that whole car, and I'm sure they are, and I'm sure Cam's getting paid handsomely for his services and as the ambassadorship of Monster, I don't think they want much to change, because if you look at their IndyCar teams, if you look at any team that is primarily sponsored by Monster, they're not giving you a whole lot of creative license with it. But I think it works well. All right, aesthetics aside, let's get into something a little bit more meaningful. And I think the place to start, and I mentioned it earlier in the introduction as well, is kind of the conjecture from a lot of people, from teams, from drivers, from skeptics, people, racing fans who, I don't know, for use of a better phrase, wanted to see not Gen 3 fail, but kind of had a vested interest in seeing it struggle. But there was a lot of conjecture about whether Gen 3 would be ready for our season, the start of the season, whether the season would need to be pushed back, whether there'd be supply issues, getting engines, getting spare parts, etc. But from what it seems, every car now, every team has had multiple shakedowns. For the most part, things have gone pretty well. There was a sensor issue for a few teams early on in the tests that, pretty much came about because one of the, can't remember what it was. It might have been a reservoir was emptying without, it might have been, I can't exactly remember what it was, but there was an element of the car that didn't have a sensor. Fluid was draining out of it. And because it didn't have a sensor, the feed that the driver was getting wasn't accurate, but it's since then been rectified. So Joe, what do you make of the whole timeline of events? Happy, not happy? It's worked pretty well, I think.
I think everyone should have a vested interest in seeing this sort of Gen 3 package come together. And I can't sort of get my head around a lot of the negativity that's been surrounding it. I mean, when the older generation Mustang came in, there was, we all knew that it was sort of a placeholder for when we would sort of get a change to the like a bigger change to the category, and it's been pushed back as well due to COVID. There definitely are things that still need to be sorted out. Like I know that teams, that the Ford teams aren't happy with the parity. I know that the Chevy teams are saying there's nothing, like the parity is really good, and that's the things I expect sort of those teams to be saying.
That'll get rectified by the test, but
yeah, but like realistically, you're always going to say that if you're one of those teams or another, because you just want to get the best breaks you can for your team. What the things are more sort of, I think, have been a bit more distasteful is a lot of the negative press surrounding like sort of the rush, and it's been a very sort of hard couple of years for anyone manufacturing anything anywhere in the world. So for these teams to sort of get these designs out, have engines that are running smoothly, yeah, there's going to be hiccups, but by and large, it's been a pretty successful sort of rollout period, even though they've probably been burning the candle at both ends. And then to see these cars on track, hear them on track, see them actually circulating, for me, it's just sort of given me like just so much excitement to actually see these things racing in anger. Whether they're definitely not going to be running at 100% first race of the season, but what category is running at 100%? In the first year of a drastic rule change, they've got to learn about these new engines. Like there was one thing I heard, it was Brad Jones was saying our cars, like a lot of cars, have been getting stuck out on track, not for any faults, but because teams are just running them to the end to see when the light goes off how much fuel is actually in the system and how far they can get. Like, so teams are doing a lot of stuff like that. So to make stories about cars stopping on track, I've sort of dismissed them, like, all right, these are just hiccups and gremlins. Seeing all the cars on track and doing, relatively what you would expect them to do is a massive achievement for all the teams. We've got these cars coming off the production line so quickly, so late in the whole design process.
Design process, all done.
And they've come out, they've looked fantastic. They're all rolling on the track. There's nothing not to be excited about.
Do you think
I am so jacked?
Do you think this year in particular, like a team like Tickford that has 4 cars, like, I mean, every one of their drivers, I think at this point was able to do an 100-lap shakedown over the last week. You reckon a team like that has got 4 teams, obviously logistically, it's going to be more intense for them sharing the workload this year, and you don't have the luxury of, consolidating your top, all your, brain power, for use of a better phrase, into 2 cars. But do you think this year, where there is still so much searching for knowledge and kind of being able to experiment and push those boundaries and see where those boundaries lie, do you think for a season like this, some of those bigger teams, Tickford, Brad Jones could see some advantage. Like obviously there's a disadvantage in the scope of their platform as well, but could there be an advantage this year just in the collection of information?
I'm not sure. I think realistically, at a time like now when there's so little information available, having a bigger team would probably help a lot. The thing I'm interested to see though is the 4 teams are supposed to be sharing a lot of information under this Ford Racing banner. Now I would expect initially that's going to be very that's going to be even more open. So I don't know how much that's going to pay off. Like, do I think having 4 cars, but 2 of them that are really competitive and 2 of them that usually aren't, is going to help you that much? Like, it remains to be seen. But I don't think it can. I don't think it can't help. I just don't think there's enough information out there to really know at the moment.
Fair enough. Well, let's move into this then. So we've had we've got teams launching tonight, the season launching tonight. We've got testing in 2 days, I think it is. From your point of view, what's a successful test for these teams? I mean, what kind of things should they be looking for? Like from my point of view, I think the fact that so much running has taken place, like I don't want to say smaller teams, but you see the teams like MSR, like Premier getting out last week and doing their shakedowns as well. For the most part, to see all of these teams, the big teams and the smaller teams, kind of work through their shakedowns with relative levels of success. Are we moving into a time in the season where you obviously said they're not going to be at 100% already, but I think we're at a point where we're getting close to 100% before the season starts. And it wouldn't surprise me if by the time we get to Newcastle that, while we might not, or teams might not have a full picture understanding of the setup window for their car, with the knowledge that they have, they'll be running at, 100% of what they know.
Do you have any ideas about that, H?
Oh, look, I think it's the first year is going to be a fact-finding mission, essentially. I think it's the same in every category. Like we saw Formula 1 last year. 1 team hit the ground running, or 2 teams, and then everyone else was playing catch-up. So I think Triple Eight will come out of the gate all guns blazing in Newcastle, but
this was another thing. So one thing that was really interesting at the end of last year was that a lot of teams, Team 18, Erebus do it anyway, but a lot of the teams that are customers from other teams decided to take their car builds in-house for the reason of wanting to know how to put the cars together, what exactly it was that constituted the cars to have, by the time the season came around, to have a bit of advantage. And I think it was Charlie Schwerkoff that said, like we can buy the car from Triple Eight. We've done it before, but we've seen issues with power steering that we're the only team that's having, because we don't actually understand the whole package that we've got. So a decision was made this year to kind of take the car build internal to do it within their own factory, so that a lot of the mechanics and engineers would have that greater level of understanding for the car, how it goes together and the intricacies of it, just to kind of get, or maybe not even to have an advantage, but just not to have a disadvantage to those teams that are putting it together for everyone.
Do you think that's enough time for those smaller teams to have that infrastructure in place and have that knowledge in place moving forward for this season?
Well, they've done it. Well, they've done they're all their cars are out there and got ready to go. I think the thing that's made it a little bit easier for them is, number one, they've got no necessity to have like an engine team anymore, because all the engines are specs. That minimizes some of the workload that they have to kind of deal with, maintaining the engine and all that kind of caper. And number two, a lot of the parts are the all of them are spec now as well. So essentially, if you know how to put the Meccano together and pull it apart and, prep it and maintain it, etc., it's not so much an engineering role anymore as much as it is a maintenance kind of thing. So I think that's made the jobs for a lot of the teams a lot easier, particularly the smaller teams, and it might be giving them maybe not an advantage, but I think it brings the field closer together, because all of a sudden, hopefully, with the decrease in importance for the arms race, essentially to get an engineering advantage through spending money, and through being able to put more money into more parts that you don't have to worry about failure and fatigue that some smaller teams with less money might have to worry about. It might just bring the back of the field closer to the front. So I think with the nature of the Gen 3 formula, it's probably given a lot of those smaller teams more time to do it themselves. And the other reality is, with the kind of the lack of requirement for engineering now, in order to keep your workforce doing things and not have to kind of descale, you can get them to get involved in some of these new avenues of maintenance and building, etc., so that you can keep the workforce, but redistribute them to different roles.
Do you think at the pointy end that makes any changes, or we see more cars challenging for wins?
Well, I think firstly at the pointy end, I think we're going to find more competitive Super 2 cars, just because without wanting to lose talent, you might have redistribute some of it to Super 2 and to the Super 2 efforts, so that you don't lose your workforce. But I think in relation to making it more competitive, yeah, I do. Although I don't know if the disparity between the top teams in Supercar, like talking about the top 4, maybe 5, those being Triple Eight, Dick Johnson, Walkinshaw, Tickford, maybe Erebus. I think Erebus and Grove are still kind of half a tier behind. But let's just say the top 4. I don't know if the differences between those teams was based on kind of finances. I think it was just based on competence, because for whatever reason, you had the teams like, for the most part, Triple Eight and Penske, that always had a car that was in the window. Maybe not last year, but before that, they always had a car that was in the window every weekend. And you had, Tickford and Walkinshaw that, 40% of the year were kind of out of the window and had to make the most of the rounds they had.
I think one thing that you're overstating is when you're talking about these cars being in and out of windows. Like, one thing that is very important is at the moment no windows exist. So
until that last year.
Yeah, no, but relating teams to last year, like when you talk about Grove, all you can say about Grove is now they are a very well-funded team with a very good leadership team involved. They've got 2 people now who have massive experience from the Triple Eight stable. You've got Couchy and you've got McPherson. McPherson's left Walkinshaw. Like, all the teams are on a level playing field in the fact that they're taking these new cars that have never been tested except on shakedowns to a variety of different tracks. And I think what's going to be very apparent this year is that you're going to have teams that are going to be like set up in a good ballpark for some tracks, and probably they'll just get there and try something that will seem to be competitive, and other teams will try something else that doesn't. And there'll be like I feel like we'll see sort of like the whole like the pecking order of the grid change between race to race a lot more frequently this year, because some teams will hit, some teams will miss, some teams will try something that will have a massive difference in performance. And this is before teams start having like years of data. We're going to these races with like minutes of data, not even years on, and like no minutes on different tracks. We've got a new tire compound that no one's tested before. We're going to have temperatures that these tires are going to race on, and tracks that these cars haven't raced on, with drivers that haven't raced these cars on these tracks. Like, all these factors compound on each other.
I fully understand what you're saying, and I 100% agree with it. But I do think that you can we can, like, the formula is completely new. And that makes it a level playing field for everyone. But at the same time, like, it's kind of the same conversation we had last year about Ferrari and their failure to perform in some scenarios. You've got teams on the grid, particularly those top four that, we're talking about, who for the most part, maybe Walkinshaw's a little bit newer to the party in their recent history than the other three, that have won big races, that have been competitive and dominant at different points over the last 5-10 years, have won championships. And I think that even with the new formula, if there's teams that are going to make the jump faster, it's probably going to be the same teams, because they've got the most talented drivers, arguably, because they've got the most talented engineers behind them. Like, we're talking about, these engineers at Grove. Yes, that, we already saw that they became a lot more consistent last year, but they've got a rookie driver, and they've got a driver who, for whatever reason, is as hot and cold as any driver on that races. And so I do think that, yes, while there is the even playing field, and we will see definitely anomalies and shifting in the grid, I think when push comes to shove, like we saw in Formula One last year, those big teams, the cream of the field, are probably going to rise to the top sooner than everyone else, just because they've also got the understanding of having to make something from a weekend, and having the pressure to kind of pull something out of a bag. We talk about Mostert, you talk about Waters, you talk about Van Gisbergen, when they kind of flunk up his car, once or twice a year. All these blokes, maybe even Will Davidson did it last year, probably more than De Pasquale. But all these guys are, seasoned veterans. And if you need them to pull a cat out of a bag, they're probably the ones that are going to do it more than anyone else in the field. Hence why they're occupying big positions.
I think those drivers you mentioned, one thing that they all have in common is that they can sort of drive around car problems and make a difference. And I'm interested to see if any other drivers can join that group. Like, with this new platform that's coming, it does seem like it's a much more driver-focused championship and driver-focused car now. I definitely expect to see those ones at the front, just because of their nature. I just want to see if there's another driver another couple of drivers who can actually sort of join that group. There's, like, for me, like, I think Brody Kostecki has been and Feeney have been probably the two from last year who I've seen the most from. And I would say probably Brody more than Feeney last year, because he always seems to be willing to put that car in places where other people don't, to sort of get
sometimes
a result.
Too willing, but I think his eagerness is also sometimes his weakness.
That's really a part of, I think, learning and coming of age. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be some, not harsh words, but definitely words between teams at the start of the year about, hey, like, there isn't much spares going around at the moment. Turnarounds for cars is going to be longer because we don't understand that these cars half as well as we used to. And especially going to a street circuit for race one is going to be a very interesting proposition for all these drivers.
Do you think? Yeah, sorry.
That's right. Keep going.
Do you think all good and willing that those top four teams, maybe a fifth, I don't know, are on a similar playing field, quite level? Do you think Anton can join those other three that we always talk about? Do you think he has the consistency? Because we know he can pull out the results, but he hasn't been consistent in the past, right?
I don't know if I would classify Anton as one of the drivers yet who drives beyond his car. I mean, I think when the car is good, he's great. When the car is out of its window, he kind of gets lost in the midfield a little bit, or behind those guys. Whereas Mostert, Waters, if their car's out of the window, they can pull it to between a third and a sixth. Anton, I think, between a sixth and a 10th. Van Gisbergen is the cream of the crop. He can still pull it to a second or a third. That's how
I think what we sort of expect from Anton though is that with the last generation of cars, when Scotty Mack left, you would expect that Dick Johnson had all the sort of data that they needed to build strong weekends for pretty much every round of the championship. And whereas you see Walkinshaw and Tickford definitely had tracks that they were better and worse at, you'd always expect them to go to these tracks and struggle a bit. You never really expected that from Dick Johnson or the Dick Johnson team. So to then see them having such up-down weekends, like in relation to that team, I think that's why we sort of either we've heaped a lot of pressure on him to perform, but you would expect that with the sort of backlog of championship data that team has, the platform for him to then build off every weekend would be a lot stronger. Whereas now we're going back to everyone sort of at base camp. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Even from last year, when was that? Like from Dick Johnson's point of view, from the team's point of view, I mean, he was meant to be the next gun for the team, and then they had a stable person like Will Davidson come in and kind of probably contribute to the team's championship, in very similar to the Fabian Coulthard role that he played when Scotty Mack was doing his thing. But I mean, for them, and all credit to Will Davidson, but he was by far the more consistent driver last year for them in qualifying and in the race, and just had less peaks and valleys. So I think that was a big surprise for the team, and I think there's anyone who's looking at that team has to question the measure of the man a little bit, because in every other one of those teams that we're talking about, those drivers, those aces, Mostert, Waters, Van Gisbergen, I can count on one hand when I think Waters might have lost to his teammates once last year without having a DNF.
But do you think DJR were so strong because McLaughlin was so good? Do you know what I mean? Like, did he make up for the deficiencies in the team, like we're saying the other three do?
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. I mean, you've got someone like McLaughlin or Van Gisbergen, and they do. It's undoubtable that they elevate the car that they're driving to, some realistically unattainable level for most drivers, and I'll give them that. But when you think about how successful that car was, when you think about the quality that they've got in the engineering, and obviously he had Ludo Lacroix. So if there's, Ludo's done it with, Triple Eight, with what's his name? He was with Lowndes, right? Ludo.
Yeah.
He's done it with Lowndes. He's done it with Scotty. He knows how to set up a car. So yes, he doesn't have to be at the level of McLaughlin, but I don't even think he was at the level of those other people that we're talking about realistically. I still can't understand. And I'm not trying to be like dramatic, but I don't know how him in a DJR losing to McLaughlin, to Waters in a Tickford, that was kind of up and down all year. Like realistically, they had some great races. He's a great qualifier. We know that he's got the 1 lap pace, but the race pace for that team was it was all over the place. It was probably the out of the 4 teams, it was the worst one. For Waters to come second, and for him not to kind of be there,
and Chaz to come third.
Yeah, I don't.
Problems.
Yeah, I struggle. Yeah, exactly. Exactly the same. We're talking about the same thing. Good qualifiers, great races, but the consistency of the car setup week in and week out for those two teams was not there. And for
I think
not
as well,
to be there, it's bizarre. I actually don't know what to make of it right yet, but I want to see a little bit more from him this year. Although I feel like by halfway in the season, I'll be pretty happy to kind of swing a hammer.
I think I don't. I think
not swing a hammer like get him fired, but like to kind of speak my mind about it.
You've made your point. Like you've been rambling for a couple of minutes. I think, I think realistically, what you're trying to say is like most of those drivers last year had a weekend where you thought, okay, like we're always being reminded, why there's something special. I think with Chaz, it was that race up at the top end when he had these tires that were 4 or 5 like that he pitted so early, and he was able to hold off, funny enough, De Pasquale to the race win. On
I
the
just
last
think back
couple.
I think back to Bathurst when it was Cam, Chaz chasing Van Gisbergen and like those last 20 laps or whatever it was. That was epic.
But it was always those three pretty much through the whole year. Most race weekends, a give and take a few, where Tickford had a few bad ones and Walkinshaw did, but you always knew that it was going to come down to sort of races between them. Whereas Anton, I think he's had a few good qualifyings and had a few good races, but you've never sort of seen like, you've maybe seen like 1 or 2 good weekends, and then there's always something that sort of minuses all that good work he's done. And I don't think I'm not as worried about him as Anth is, because I do think he's not that far off. But I like between like him and Nick Perker, they're the two this year that when I look at them, I go, okay, you guys have had subpar years, yeah, and like this is a year to sort of that you have to perform, or there definitely could be heads on the chopping block. Because there's a lot of young good drivers coming through at the moment as well now, whereas you don't want to sort of be sitting around waiting for someone to sort of get there, and then you miss on the next Chaz. So it is going to be an interesting year for those drivers, where there's a little bit more pressure as well with learning a new car.
All right, next point of conversation. I think this is going to be a good one. So Gen 3 took a long time coming, right? But it has very quickly gone from an idea to a reality over the last, we can say 24 months, but realistically with the manufacturing side of it, 9 months. Yeah, realistically.
Manufacturing side probably last 8 weeks, but in terms of engines, yeah, not a year.
Let's just say 9 months. Let's average it out. So it's happened very quickly at the end due to COVID, due to whatever, a long time to get the rules finalized, etc. But can that be like, if you're another manufacturer that wants to come in, can that actually be a case study where you say, you know what, if we want to go racing, like with the rules being as they are, if we got an engine that is essentially going to get BOP'd anyway, we could be racing within 2 years of deciding to do it, because it's been done now. We've seen that it's been done successfully very quickly when you look at the amount of laps that have already been put on the board by these, new generation cars. So if you're a new team that might want to come into the series, all of a sudden, it's not an idea. You've got cars on the track. They look fantastic. That you can definitely see the brand relevance to, well, Mustang in particular, because it's a current car. If you're another one of those manufacturers and you kind of get through half the season, it's looking good, and you kind of say, we're interested, but now we're ready to commit. Could we see, new cars on the grid by 2025 even?
I think it's really going to come down to what we get as a product. If the racing's as good as, where it wants to be at, and every sort of race, we're not seeing like sort of, we're seeing that there's both cars are very competitive, and we've been able to BOP the engines to like a real good place, and the aero is at a real good place, that it doesn't matter what you're driving. That's going to be the biggest selling point for other manufacturers. They're going to have faith that the category can do what it's saying it can do. If there's one car that seems to be performing better than the others, and the category takes a long time to sort of get them to a place where they're even, it's not going to encourage another manufacturer to come in at all. I think one thing that I'm not too worried about this time is I'm not disappointed if another manufacturer doesn't come in, because one thing we do know is that the category can be supported with the tribalism of 2 manufacturers. Would I love to see another one in there? 100% I would. But
only thing that concerns me is that you've got one of the cars that isn't actively being marketed anymore. So you've got the Chevy Camaro. That's well and good for the, we can talk about tribalism. But if you're trying to sell a product that is based on brand relevance and 50% of the brand relevance is not relevant, and you're not actively pursuing more relevance, well, then all it takes is for Chevy to not want to be involved in anymore. And then you actually do have a dilemma.
Yeah, but I think the fact that the Chevy Camaro isn't in production, I think after next year, isn't
It's
a
already
problem.
not in production.
No, I think they're having one more year of special edition ones coming out. But I don't think like that's the problem, because there's like you see the way that General Motors as a company is investing in motorsport. You see them investing in a GT3 program. You see them investing money in Cadillac in a endurance program. You see them wanting to get into Formula One. There's definitely going to be a car in the General Motors stable that is going to attack the market that the Mustang car is attacking. There's no way there's going to be a void. You know,
right now,
it's too. Yeah,
it's going to be a hot video for YouTube. Right now, 2 current cars, road cars, that by 2025 could be on the Supercars grid. No time to think about it. Harry, go.
Stinger.
Kia Stinger.
Yep.
And
maybe the Volkswagen Arteron or whatever it's called. I can't think of the actual name. Sedan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because Volkswagen's the group itself is investing quite heavily in motorsport as well. So they're just off the top of my head.
Yeah. All right, Joe, throw me 2.
I still think one that would probably find the most relevance is a company like BMW. They've got a lot of sort of sports shapes that you can choose from. Whether or not they want to, it's going to be like a wholehearted investment, or they're going to need to piggyback another team's like expertise as well.
M3 maybe.
M3, M4. I don't know. I don't know all the names of all the shapes, but I know there'd be a shape that would fit. Same thing with like Audi. Audi always have like a relatively low sedan involved as well. So ones like that, I would love to see a Chrysler SRT.
Well, they could literally put that car into the category without having to worry about an engine, and it would purely be a design and aerodynamic
Chrysler
test for them to get into the series. They wanted to run the same engine. It's a GM engine, rebadged as a Chrysler engine.
Chrysler's not GM. Chrysler's Fiat.
Isn't Chrysler GM?
No, Chrysler's Fiat.
That's ignorant, man. That's ignorant of me.
I know. You just literally made us sound like the biggest.
Chrysler was GM.
No, they're Fiat.
No, they're part of the
Fiat Chrysler.
Jeep Chrysler. Yeah, Fiat. They're all one group.
They don't run an LSA. They have a Hemi. They've got the best sounding muscle engine on the planet.
I always thought that Chrysler was under the GM banner. There you go.
Ignoramus, mate. Ignoramus. I would love to see one of those cars on the grid, though.
I think it would be pretty easy. Like,
but Camry.
Camry. I don't know if.
I've
given up Toyota. on Toyota. I don't think
it's not going to be the Camry, but they have a new Supra coming out, which would be roughly the same size as the Mustang. Yeah. So I could see them.
You reckon?
Yeah. The Supra would be.
The Mustang is not a big. It's not a big car, and I think you could very easily.
Bigger than I thought.
Pardon?
The Supra is bigger than I thought it was.
Yeah, and also the new Supra that's coming out is being modeled. A version of it's being made for Super GT, and I think in Australia, coming up against the Mustang more so than the Camaro, that would be very brand relevant.
Guys,
pardon?
One that I think would be an absolute slam dunk.
Can I finish my point?
Is a Nissan 400Z. This is what you do to me all the time. I just wanted to let you know.
I just want to say Toyota could very easily jump into it because they've got an engine that is run in NASCAR that they could kind of throw into Australia, get it BOP'd for our requirements, and very quickly you've got a model that's relevant. You've got a chassis that you're not worrying about. You've got an engine.
I don't think Toyota are interested in going supercar racing, unfortunately.
They're interested in NASCAR racing.
Yeah, but then they are. But that's such a massive market. I think that's a much more important market to be involved in, because like that's a market where they're probably not top dog, whereas here they're top dog already. They know that. they don't need to go supercars racing to reaffirm that. And I think if they needed to, they would have done it already.
If
Like,
there was one,
I think
there was
the
one,
Nissan
if there was
400Z.
if there was one manufacturer that even like from supercars perspective that you would want to bring in that could potentially run a V6 engine against a V8 and get more people talking about V6s and hopefully bringing in some of those other V6 dominated manufacturers, then I mean, if I was supercars, I would be begging Toyota to come in and kind of, I'd be doing everything I can to make it as appetizing for them as possible, just purely so that you've got a flagship
Are you
banner.
saying this because you read the article this week that they released that they've got no intentions at all of joining supercars anytime? And
I didn't see that article. Why?
Yeah, I think it came out yesterday. There was
Toyota said this.
Yeah, they said that they have no interest at the given time of bringing any of their cars into the supercar group category.
Maybe that's their way of getting,
which is totally on brand for them.
Oh, I thought it was a good idea. The other one that I thought would be very easy to do to bring the Jaguars ZF in. Jag was kind of
you could even do
they could run a Ford engine like it's the Ford company.
They could do a Subaru WRX. You could do a WRX. You could do a Nissan 400Z. Like there's definitely enough car bodies out there that you could do it with. It's all about like, do the companies want to bring that money? And I think as well, another important thing is you don't want to do it half-heartedly. If you're going to do this, you need to bring at least,
you need the manufacturer support.
4 to 6 cars, which is probably 3 teams at once to do it properly. If you're looking at what Ford and what Chevy are doing, that's, I think, one thing that's important as well. I don't know. I haven't heard nothing. I think it's going to be a sort of the test is on supercars to prove that this new idea is a winner. And I think if it's a winner, you might get sniffs. What are you laughing at?
Someone just sent me a reel of a guy doing a squat and then his pants blow out when he gets to the bottom of his squat.
You're a dickhead.
Anyway, so that's going to be I think that'll be a good little section for YouTube. But you got to give it some clickbaity name. The 6 manufacturers signed up for supercars in 2025 or something. One of those. You got to lie. Those clickbait lies are the ones that get the best.
You know what though? Don't you always feel shitty after you get baited?
Yeah, but you know what? I also
fucking hate it.
I also know that when I read it, I'm like, this is gonna bait me, and I know it's not. I know it's not the story I think it is, but I still look at it just in case, and then it's like, you got me again.
You know what? I always get baited on Arsenal hate videos. So I always want to hear what people are saying, like doubting us. And then I always get mad, and then they literally say, like in the first minute and a half of the video, sorry for the clickbait title. And I'm just like, now I've got to watch the whole video.
What were you gonna say, H?
I was gonna say the race are pretty good at the clickbait title.
Yeah, all of those big media, like all the big media now that on YouTube, they all have the clickbait titles that are never as.
I've learned.
I guess what, it's part of the game now. It's actually it's just marketing.
If you put a question mark or an exclamation mark at the end of it, it stops it being a statement or makes it into a question or just like a.
It's not clickbait anymore. Yeah.
Yes, it's not clickbait.
It's not misleading. It's just a question.
Oh, it's misleading, but it's not a lie. It's not an outright lie.
So we just have to make sure we put questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any more points about supercars for tonight?
I think we're going to get a lot more questions and a lot more clarity after the test day. Like I think we're definitely going to at least see how close the parity is or how much work is still needed to get to where people want it to be. From what I hear, Ford is not happy with the parity in terms of the engine, but also the aero. The lap times are definitely
how do they really know yet?
See, that's the thing. Like
I know that Tickford were doing a lot of tests with Erebus. Number one, to kind of see what parts were interchangeable, and number two, maybe for a bit of that kind of parity determination, for use of a better phrase. So like there's probably a bit coming from there.
I just definitely think, but like on this test day, we're going to get some some proper high speed runs in, and if it's skewed one side, you're going to know very quickly like what that work needs to be done. And if it seems to be a decent spread, then we'll know that at least we're on the right path. I don't think we're going to be perfect till probably mid. I don't think we might be perfect till the end of the year, but at least I'd say by mid year, you're going to have a decent amount of parity. Like they were able to address the old Mustangs parity issue, or the Commodore's parity issues of that Mustang.
They did that relatively pretty quickly.
So I think we could definitely see at least some quick measures put in place to fix it up.
The other thing, hopefully, with the nature of how the engines are now understood by and kind of calibrated, I think, I can't remember who it's by, but I think maybe there'll be quick measures as well to balance those performances too. So hopefully it's not an issue, but we've got tests. We've got even like after getting some Friday practice running in at Newcastle, I wouldn't be opposed to slight tweaks. I mean, obviously there is sandbagging that does take place in some BOP categories before qualifying. But even if they were to make a decision after qualifying, so it would affect some people obviously, but you make a decision after everyone's had a proper good go at it for the first time, and then you kind of get a real ballpark, number for, where an average, I guess, for where the different cars are based. So it'll be interesting. But I think
it's going to be interesting.
Going to be awesome.
Day.
Like I can't wait for Newcastle. I can't wait to get a bit more information from the tests. I can't wait for these last two liveries to come out as well. I mean, these new cars look amazing. I think as far as Australian fans are concerned, Supercars it's on a winning trajectory. And I think, for everybody's sake, we hope that and we believe that it's going to be a real success. So
I don't think we say it enough, but we should give Supercars props for delivering what they believe is a package that the fans have asked for. The fans have asked to keep V8 engines. They've done it. They've asked for, awesome muscle cars with less downforce. They've done it. Yeah, not everyone's going to be happy. Some people don't seem to be happy because it's a purpose-built race car now, not a road-derived race car. You can't please everyone. Some people aren't happy that Walkinshaw have gone to Ford, but they're not they're not the fans fitting the bill. You don't just, there's, a lot of disgruntled people in the world that you can't really let their voices detract from the hype, I think, that is building.
How can you hate that Walkinshaw's gone to Ford when you look at that car?
Regardless of if you're disappointed or not, I think that the reasons that they've given are valid reasons. And yeah, you don't have to be happy about it, but to act like it's been some drastic slight against you is just childish.
The Camaro is not a Holden anyway, realistically. Like, Holden's done.
I think the fans that want to love the sport and want to see it succeed will always be there, and the ones who want to complain were complaining about other things already. It's just going to be complaining about something else, and then they'll fix up whatever they're complaining about, and there'll be something else to complain about. So I think the sort of the main thing is just to keep your eyes on the positives. Regardless of how it looks in the first race weekend, there's a clear vision of delivering the racing that the fans have been asking for a couple of years now, and that should be commended. That at least the effort has been made to give the fans what they have asked for and what they are saying they want to put their money to.
I'm pretty optimistic we're going to see a great product, and if that does come about and the product is there, and hypothetically, if we were to get more manufacturers in the sport, then anyone who's hating is hating, just
they're hating for the fact of hating.
Just exactly hating for the sake of it, hating out of stubbornness. I'm pretty pumped for this new era. I think, the proof will be in the pudding. Time will tell. But regardless, everything that they've done up to this point makes a lot of sense mentally, makes a lot of sense when you kind of just consider the state of the sport. So, hopefully logic prevails, and we get what we're all hoping for. And if the optics of the new car is anything to go by, based on what we had in the past, with the bastardized Mustang and the kind of hatchback Holden with the huge rear wing that kind of sat 30 or 300 mil off the back of it.
That's the Ford.
And the Holden. The Holden had a
The
huge
Ford's
wing.
rear wings, it's worse.
Yeah, the Ford was worse, but like the Holden was still bastardized. Let's not get it mistaken. It was better. It was definitely better hidden, but it wasn't.
No, the Holden was a good looking race car. The Ford.
Regardless, Supercars is on the up, boys. Can't wait for it. And everyone, again, thank you so much for listening. Hopefully we'll be bringing you a lot more Supercars content this year. I mean, it's definitely something that, we've realized last year was in demand. People were interested in it. People were reacting to it. So that's, from our point of view, we're really impressed with that. We really want to make sure that we keep bringing out relevant Supercars content for you. Great, robust discussions and some depth of thought that you might not find in other places, particularly when, we know where Chrysler, comes from. So again, thank you so much for listening to the pod. Thank you for, all your support. Again, I would just like to ask if you can continue to like, subscribe, and share. And we'll bring you another pod next week, hopefully with a little bit of a review of a bit of Drive to Survive.